So in this video, we're going to recap the components that make up rotational systems. So we have three types of components that we're going to consider. We have the inertia, the damping, and also a rotational spring. So let's start off with the inertia. And because these are rotational systems, usually we're looking at them on shafts. So that's what my diagram is going to be looking at as well. So this here is a shaft. And we're going to draw in the direction that we're going to measure the torque and also the angle of the shaft. So this is the angular displacement. The other thing I'm going to mark in is J, which is the constant associated with the inertia, so how big that inertia is. So what we're interested in for these rotational systems is the relationship between the torque and the angular displacement, so T and theta in this diagram. So for inertia, the relationship is that the torque, T, is equal to the inertia, J, multiplied by the angular acceleration of the shaft. So that's theta double dot, the second derivative of displacement. What we want to do now is convert this from the time domain into the frequency domain. Okay, and I'll start off with, the torque. So we know that torque is a function of time. So when we take the Laplace transform, we would capitalize it, but since it's already a capital as I've drawn it, just going to leave it as T. J here is a constant. It doesn't change with time, so it just stays out the front. And we need to take the Laplace transform of theta, which again we know is a function of time. It's got two derivatives. So when we Laplace transform it, that means it gets two s's, or s squared, and the variable itself gets carried over as well. Again, you could capitalize this if you wanted, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. Alright, so that's the first component dealt with. The next one that we're going to look at is the damper. So again, let's start off by drawing ourselves a little diagram. So let's pretend that the damper is up against a wall. And this is what they're drawn like. And again, what we're interested in is the torque and the angle of the shaft. Okay. So the relationship this time, I forgot to mention as well, we need the constant associated with the damper, how strong it is. So I'm going to call it C. So this time the torque is going to be proportional to the velocity of our shaft, okay, so theta dot. So the equation is T is equal to C, the constant, multiplied by theta dot. Now again, what we want to do is take the Laplace transform of this. Alright, T again is a function of time, so when you transform it, it becomes T again. C is a constant, so it stays out the front. And the Laplace transform of theta dot is just going to be s theta. Alright, so one left, and that's the rotational spring. So again, let's draw it against a wall. And what we want to measure is the torque and the angle of the shaft. And the constant, this time I'm going to call K. Alright, so now we need to work out again the relationship between the torque and the angular displacement. So for a spring, they're going to be directly proportional to each other, and K is the constant of proportionality. So T is equal to K times theta. So again, we want to convert this into the Laplace domain. And it's just going to look essentially the same. Again, you would capitalize these if you wanted to, or if I had drawn it in lowercase to begin with. Alrighty, so now what we need to talk about is the equation that should be solved for each of your free body diagrams. So this time, the equation is that the sum of the torques applied to your shaft need to be equal to the inertia times the angular acceleration. So this equation needs to be applied to each free body diagram of your rotational system. Alright, the very last thing I want to note is that for these systems, we need to introduce a node between each spring and damper that are in series, even if there isn't an inertia present. So what I mean by that is, let me draw an example. Okay, let's pretend this is acting against the wall. So when we drew our free body diagrams of the system, we would need to measure the angle at this point over the inertia. We would also need to measure this one across the inertia. However, these are in series, so you need to have a third node in here. Okay, so in that point you've got no inertia, so when you drew the free body diagram of this point, we know that the sum of the torques have to equal J times theta double dot. J is the inertia. We don't actually have one at this point, so this side just goes to 0. Okay, so that's the only real trick with these problems, is just watch out if you do end up with components in series, so springs, dampers together, you need to make sure that you introduce that extra node to measure what's happening between them. So that's all there is for this video, and see you in another one.